trying to convince myself and everybody else that I was somebody, that I was important. And during that third decade, God showed me that I was important to Him. But not only was I important to Him, but He also showed me that I was a nobody without Him, that I had to depend on Him. Now, there have been a lot of important people through the years, throughout human history. But more important than the people that we might think of as being in our own generation, or maybe in a generation or two that has passed on behind us, there's those that exercised extraordinary faith. To them, God would say, "You is important." Think about Moses. If we're going to think about important people in human history, we've got to mention Moses. Moses confronted the most powerful man in the world at the time and pronounced on him the 10 plagues before each one happened. And they did happen. Moses turned the Nile River into blood. He turned a staff into a snake. He parted the Red Sea. He brought water from rocks. To God, Moses is important. Think about David, King of Israel, the one who is most well known, most well remembered, the one in whom the line of the Messiah would come, the line of King David. David fought a giant while he was still a boy and defeated him. He miraculously won numerous battles and built a mighty kingdom at the same time. To David, God would say, "You is important." Think about Solomon, David's son. Solomon did something that even his father was not allowed to do. He built Israel's first and most glorious temple. To Solomon, God would say, "You is important." Think about Esther. Esther put her own life on the line for the sake of her fellow Jews, just to save them. To Esther, God would say, "You is important." Think about Peter. Peter got out of a boat in the middle of the Sea of Galilee and walked on the water. Even if it was for a brief time, he still walked on the water. I bet you haven't done that. To Peter, God would say, "You is important." And as the writer of Hebrews said in Hebrews 11:32, "And what more shall I say, for time will fail me if I tell of the many other men of faith." There's so many that we could talk about this morning. On my first experience with a demon, I was with my Bible teacher, who was my Bible teacher during my late teens and early 20s. And he was invited to go visit this woman at her home, and he took me along with him. So we went to see this woman, and he told me on the way that she was possessed by a demon. I didn't really know what that meant at the time. And we got to the door, and it was one of those doors, and on each side were windows that you could see in, those little narrow windows, and I was peeking in the window. I was too young not to know that I wasn't supposed to do that. I was peeking in the window, and I saw this lady coming to answer the door, and she dropped down on the floor and slithered like a snake to the door and then got back up again. And we went in, and he cast that demon out of that woman. Think about Rick Bonfim, who could tell of the chronicles of Rick's extraordinary faith. To Rick, God says, "You is important." I was with Sylvia Trollinger in Brazil. When we came out of a church one time, this girl looked at us and hissed at us. Sylvia grabbed that woman by the hair and put her finger right up to her nose and cast that demon out of her. I've been on a lot of mission trips, 20-something. I've seen the dead raised. I've seen people delivered from demons. I've seen legs grow out to be the same length of the other leg. I saw an old woman healed on her deathbed, and even have seen a storm stilled miraculously. And we'll come back to the story of the storm in just a little bit. But first, I want you to think about Elijah. Elijah commanded a drought to come on Israel for 3.5 years, and then he commanded it to leave. He resurrected a widow's son. He called down fire from heaven and he parted the Jordan River. Many miracles Elijah performed. And to Elijah, God would say, "You is important." Let's pray. Father, we come to you today full of faith, full of assurance that you are with us. So we look to hear from you this morning. We demolish arguments and every pretension that sets itself up against the knowledge of God, and we take captive every thought to make it obedient to Christ. I hope that you're taking notes this morning. I want to give you 12 steps to exercising extraordinary faith. 12 steps to exercising extraordinary faith. So let's go to 1 Kings chapter 18. I'm going to pick a few verses throughout that chapter, but let's start with verse 1. Now it happened after many days that the word of the Lord came to Elijah in the 3rd year, saying, "Go, show yourself to Ahab, and I will send rain on the face of the earth." The drought had been going on now for over 3 years. Step 1. Listen. Elijah listened when God told him to do something. We find no evidence that there was an argument or that there was an attempt to weasel out of the mission or even a request for clarification. God said, and Elijah listened to what God said. God said, "Go," and Elijah perked up and listened to find out where he was being sent. Verse 2. So Elijah went and showed himself to Ahab. Now a famine was severe in Samaria. Step 2. Take the first step. Elijah didn't have the whole picture. He only had a little piece of the picture. All he knew was that he was to go and talk to King Ahab. He didn't know what he was supposed to say to him. No information was given to him. He was just told to go and show himself to King Ahab. Don't expect God to work overtime trying to convince you to go. Sometimes we want God to talk us into it. So we say, "Tell us a little more. Give me a little more information. I need to know more, God, before I can do this." But God told Elijah, "Go." Elijah went. Don't think yourself so important that God has to explain himself to you. He does not. All he has to do is say, "Go." He doesn't have to tell you for what you're going. In the next few verses, Elijah runs into Obadiah. Obadiah was a servant of King Ahab's, but Obadiah was a faithful Jew. And he had hidden away, unbeknownst to Elijah, he had hidden away the prophets of God that were in Israel, the true prophets of God. But he ran into Obadiah, and he asked Obadiah to tell Ahab that he, Elijah, was on his way to see the king. Obadiah was afraid to do so because he was afraid that God would whisk Elijah away to protect him. And after Obadiah told him that he saw Elijah, Ahab would have wanted him to capture him and bring him to him. Verse 15. Elijah said to Obadiah, "As the Lord of hosts lives, before whom I stand, I will surely show myself to him today." So Obadiah went to meet Ahab and told him, and Ahab went to meet Elijah. Step 3, recognize the chain of command. Obadiah was faithful and had even hidden away the prophets of Israel. But he feared the power of the king because he knew that the king had the power to cut his head off. He knew that if he didn't do what the king said, the king could kill him and would kill him. But he respected the Lord's anointed even more. I've known Rick Bonfim for 37 years now. It's a long time. And I've walked by his side for at least the last 20 years. I've carried his briefcase in his coat. I carried his coat because he'd give it away if I didn't. I carried his briefcase because I didn't think he ought to have to carry it. I did anything that he asked me to do, and I did anything that I thought would help him, even if he didn't ask me to do it. I respected his authority, and he's never abused my respect. So I want you to hear me on this. You will never exercise extraordinary faith until you submit to the authority of those God put above you. People ask me where I started or how I got my start in ministry. I carried his briefcase. That's how I got started. If you cannot humble yourself to do that, you will never exercise extraordinary faith. I would have polished his shoes had he asked me. Thank God he never asked me. 1 Kings 18:19, Elijah told Ahab, "Now then, send and gather to me all Israel at Mount Carmel together with 450 prophets of Baal and 400 prophets of Asherah who eat at Jezebel's table." Step 4, work without a net. You don't need a backup plan. God's your backup. So you don't need to plan your escape route or have a plan B, what's going to happen if plan A doesn't work, because God guarantees you in extraordinary faith that plan A is going to work. So follow God step by step, doing what he says when he says do it. Don't question it, just do it. In the next few verses, Elijah proposed a showdown between God and Baal. He proposed that 2 altars be set up and that the true living God be asked to send down fire to light his own altar. And whichever God is the one that sends down fire, that's the true living God. Verse 24. "Then you call on the name of your God, and I will call on the name of the Lord. And the God who answers by fire, he is God." And all the people said, "That's a good idea." That's putting it on the line, isn't it? Before 450 priests of Baal, 400 priestesses of Asherah, and thousands of his own people, that's a bold claim to make. There was no backup plan, no escape route. He was on top of a mountain without a way down. Step 5. Don't be satisfied with the ordinary. Go for broke. Go all the way. Go all in. Put all your eggs in one basket. Don't hold back for tomorrow. A total investment. You will sacrifice a great blessing if you quit midstream or if you quit half-heartedly. Go all in. Step 6, walk in victory. Ignore failure and defeat. When you are walking and exercising extraordinary faith, failure and defeat do not exist. There's no such thing as failure and defeat. Elijah believed that Ahab had executed all the other prophets of Israel. He didn't know that Obadiah had hidden them away. He believed that he was the only one left. One man against all of those prophets, all those priests and priestesses of false gods, and against all the people of Israel, plus the king of Israel, all opposed to him. But Elijah walked in victory. Verse 27, 1 Kings 18:27. It came about at noon that Elijah mocked them is the priest of Baal, and said, "Call with a loud voice, for he is a god. Either he is occupied or gone aside, or is on a journey, or perhaps he's asleep and needs to be awakened." By the way, the phrase occupied or gone aside in the Hebrew is an idiom for sitting on the toilet. So basically, he called with a loud voice, for he is God. Either he's sitting on the toilet, gone somewhere, or maybe he's asleep and you need to wake him up. That's gutsy, folks. Step 7, never fear. Elijah was outnumbered 450 to 1, 850 to 1 if we throw in the priestesses of Asherah. But he was so bold that he even mocked the priest of Baal and mocked Baal. Don't be afraid. God is on your side, but don't be stupid either. Make sure that you are in the will of God, but in the will of God, don't be afraid. And if God instructs you to mock a false god, then mock the false god. Verse 30. Then Elijah said to all the people, "Come near to me." So all the people came near to him, and he repaired the altar of the Lord, which had been torn down. Step 8, repair the breach. That which was can be again. That which once existed in the spiritual realm can be repaired. It can be restored. And ministry is all about restoration, restoring relationships with God. That's why we do this. Stilling storms, casting out demons, walking on water, raising the dead, healing the sick. That's all gravy compared to getting people saved and baptized in the Holy Spirit. Sure, that's nice stuff to see. It's exciting when it happens. Gets your adrenaline flowing, gets you all excited. It's easy to preach after that. But it's for the purpose of the preaching. It's for the purpose of the Word, because through the Word people come to Christ. Through the Word people are baptized in the Holy Spirit. Verse 34. And Elijah said, "Fill 4 pitchers of water and pour it on the burnt offering and on the wood." And he said, "Do it a second time," and they did it a second time. And he said, "Do it a third time," and they did it a third time. Step 8, be confident. Be confident. Elijah was so confident that God would honor his word that he doused the altar and the sacrifice with water 3 times, so much until it filled up a trench that was around the altar. He was that confident. Not only that was he confident that God would send fire, but he was confident that the fire would be so much more sufficient to light the altar that he could douse it and soak it with water. Because God doesn't do anything halfway, so why would you do it halfway? Go all the way. Be confident. Be sure that God is going to do what God said he would do. Verse 36. At the time of the offering of the evening sacrifice, Elijah the prophet came near and said, "O Lord, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, today let it be known that you are God in Israel, and that I am your servant, and I have done all these things at your word." Step 10, command loudly. Elijah was loud enough for thousands to hear him. Thousands. He was without embarrassment or shame. He was a prophet of God. As far as he knew, he was the only prophet of God left in Israel. And he was bold about it. And he commanded loudly. And immediately after Elijah made his request, fire fell from heaven. It consumed the sacrifice, consumed the altar. It consumed the rocks that are around the altar and lapped up the water that was in the trench. That was a powerful fire. God answered Elijah in a big way. Be confident that God is going to answer you in a big way. I don't ever expect God to do something little. I expect him to do it and overdo it. Verse 40. Then Elijah said to them, "Seize the prophets of Baal. Do not let one of them escape." So they seized them, and Elijah brought them down to the brook Kishon and slew them there. 850 prophets, priests, and priestesses. Step 11, follow through. Don't stop once the extraordinary faith has been answered. Follow through. Go to the next step. The miracle was for a purpose, to bring people to God or back to God, and to leave those priests and priestesses of Baal and Asherah there in power in the kingdom would jeopardize what the whole altar experience was about. Because they would be there and they could continue to pollute Israel, so Elijah killed them, made sure that they couldn't come back and haunt them anymore. Verse 41. Now Elijah said to Ahab, "Go up, eat and drink, for there is the sound of the roar of a heavy shower." Step 12. Go to the next thing. Don't stop with that work. Go to the next place that God is working. Look for what God is doing next and go do it. Don't assume that you get a vacation just because you did this miraculous thing and called down fire from heaven, so now God's going to give you a week or two off. Now, with those steps in mind, I want you to see that God's still working through normal, everyday people every day now. Linda and I were in Guatemala a couple of years ago. We'd gone down there for the specific purpose of preaching in different churches. So we were in a church every night for the week or so that we were in Guatemala. And we went to this really poor area of Guatemala City. Pretty much every area of Guatemala City is poor, but we went to one of those, and they were having something of a joint worship service with five churches and their pastors all gathered there together. It made up about maybe 50 people. And it was a faithless bunch. I could look out at them and I could see that they were just dead as doornails. You see, the Holy Spirit has not really captivated Guatemala yet. It is a fertile field. It is like Brazil was 30 years ago. Cold. Most churches, cold. The music and the celebration, it went off without a hitch. Everything was going just as it was planned. But then I got up to preach. And the rain began to come. And it came so hard on the tin roof that you absolutely could not hear anything that I was saying. The person who was translating for me had his ear in the speaker trying to hear what I was saying so he could translate it, but so little was being heard. And I became frustrated by it. It was interfering with the preaching of the word, and to me, that was not acceptable. And I listened to the unrest in my own spirit that demanded that something be done about the rain and something be done about it fast. That's step one. Listen. I listened to what was going on inside myself about the interference of the rain with the preaching of the gospel. Step two, take the first step. I kept preaching even though it seemed futile. The rain just was not going to quit. Step three, recognize the chain of command. The problem was not mine. It was Jesus' problem. It was Jesus' problem because he's ultimately in charge, and he would have to be the one that would do something about the rain. So again, I listened. And I felt a quickening in my spirit that he was going to do something about it, and he was going to do it in a big way, that this was going to be a miracle that was going to take place, that was going to get everybody's attention. Step four, work without a net. I pointed upward, and I asked them, do you believe that God will stop this rain if we ask him to do so? And they looked at me like I was crazy. They just sat there with blank stares, the deer in the headlight look, like I can't believe he's saying that. So I instructed them to take their fingers and point it up toward the ceiling and to repeat after me. And I said something like, in the name of Jesus, we command this rain to stop. And as soon as they repeated after me, the rain slowed down, but was still noticeable, but I could continue preaching and could easily be heard, but the rain was still going. Step 5, don't be satisfied with the ordinary. I kept preaching. I knew there was more to come, but I kept preaching. Step 6, victory. I acted as though the rain was completely gone until the right time for God to do something really big came. I just kept on preaching, and I refused to accept the continuing rain as failure or defeat. I was walking in victory, even though every sign was saying that what we had done had not paid off 100%, maybe 80% at best. Step 7, do not fear. I pushed the voices of fear and doubt aside. I refused to listen to them. Everybody hears voices of doubt and fear. It's just some people don't do anything with them. They just push them aside. Other people give in to them. Well, I refuse to give in to fear. I'll step into it before I'll give in to it. I was teaching on the gifts of the Holy Spirit in this place. Don't ask me why I was teaching on the gifts of the Holy Spirit to a faithless bunch of people. I don't know why I was doing that. That's what the Lord gave me, and so that's what I did. The rain instantly and completely stopped when I started talking about extraordinary faith. I got to the gift, the spiritual gift in 1 Corinthians 12 of extraordinary faith, and the rain stopped. And I pointed up to the ceiling. I said, "Do you hear the rain?" I had everybody's attention from that minute on. Step 8, repair the breach. Well, such a miracle demanded an altar call. So we gave an altar call, and people quickly came, and we prayed hard, and we prayed fast. Miracles took place. People were falling on the floor. It was obvious that what had existed at the beginning when we walked in the doors, that had been broken, that faithless spirit had been broken, and the people had found a new faith in God. Step 9, be confident. And she was in a horrible way. The witches in the area had cast spells on her, and she didn't know any better because she knew nothing of the Holy Spirit really, and she knew nothing of the power of God, and she gave in to those spells and was very crippled by them, depressed, suicidal, fearful, just eaten up with the presence of these demons that had been beating her up for months. Step 10, command loudly. I grabbed that woman by her jaw. I looked in her eyes. I pointed my finger at her nose, just like Sylvia Trollinger had done 20 years earlier. And I commanded and demanded that demon to release her. And she shook and she screamed, and everybody watched, and a big scene was taking place right there in front of everybody. And in just a little bit, she vomited some clear, sticky stuff that went splat on the floor, and it just stuck there. It was like glue. I'd never seen anything like it. I saw the ladies later trying to clean it up, and they were getting that stuff up off of the floor. All because of a command to a demon to come out. Step 11, follow through. At the end of the altar call, I called all the doubting Thomas pastors forward because they had never seen anything like this before, and they didn't know what to do with it. Most of them were afraid they were going to lose their church. I prayed over them, and all of them received the baptism of the Holy Spirit except one. And that one left just as cold and just as hard as he did before. But the other 4 received the baptism of the Holy Spirit, and their churches were changed because of it. Step 12, go to the next thing. The service was over. They had food for us. We ate it after praying diligently over it. If you've ever been in those situations, like in Brazil, you know that everything you eat is probably not good for you, but you eat it anyway. We went to thank the cooks, and I had the now delivered preacher's wife, who, by the way, looked like an incredibly different person because she had been so delivered and so set free. I had her give the cooks her testimony, and they were changed as well. Don't stop just because it seems like it's over, because there's always something else. Rick Bonfim, Sylvia Trollingen, and I are no different than you. We're just regular, normal, everyday people. Okay, so Rick's a little less normal than the rest of us, but the rest of us are normal, everyday people. Moses, David, and Elijah, they were no different than you. They were just people. Just people. You is important. You is important. You are important, and all you need is to exercise the extraordinary that is down in here in your gut, that is just waiting to be released. It's just sitting there stirring, waiting for a response from you to do something with it. And all you got to do is listen. Coca-Cola. To you, God says, you is important. When the storm was stilled that day in Guatemala, God said to me, you is important. And I was important for one reason. God needed somebody to work through, and I was willing. People ask me sometimes what makes me different or what makes Rick Bonfim different. What makes us different is we're willing. We will do anything, anywhere God says do it, no matter how ridiculous or how scary, how frightening or how absurd it might seem. I have said crazy things to people in Walmart. Just crazy things. Walk up to people and say something to them that I have no idea what that is, but I do it anyway because I heard that word when I looked at their face. Now, maybe you don't feel so important. Maybe you feel like these kinds of things, stilling storms and casting out demons, these kind of miracle workings are for other people because you're not good enough or important enough. To you, God says you is important because every one of you is important in the kingdom of God. You can operate in extraordinary faith. You can do it. You just need to listen and take the first step. The altar's